Hi Peter, hope you're well. Thanks for the cottage. Before we go into the work section of this lesson, I'd just like to take a quick look at your swing from when we first started the process to where we are now, and touch on a few things that we discussed. Ball position looking much more appropriate, nowhere near as far back. You could, and I know this sounds almost like counterintuitive, but even though you're hitting the ground occasionally behind the ball, I would still like to see you position the ball a little bit further forward in the stance. And one of the reasons for that is, as we've discussed previously, when the ball is back in the stance, the shaft lean is increased, especially when the handle location is very well positioned as yours is. This produces more of a downward angle of attack, less dynamic loft, and if you are trying to hit a low shot, this is fine. But if you are visualizing a standard trajectory for whatever club you're using, then what you're going to do is start using the wrists and the overtaking rate through the hit to try and satisfy the trajectory that you're visualizing. So hitting the ground behind the ball is not purely about having the ball or moving the ball further back to accommodate it. It's about having the weight forward and controlling the radius more appropriately. So ball position for a 6 or 7 iron should be 2 balls back of 0 point, which is the centre of the lead shoulder, which is the centre of the arc. So we could still do with that ball moving a little bit further forward, which will help with what I'm going to discuss with you in this lesson. Having said that, the actual movements that you're making now, we discussed last time about the shoulder trajectory and the extension and filling the gap, if you will, between the lead hip and the spine. And we can see here clearly now, if we take a line up from the outer edge of the lead foot, how much more extended we are. You've got a little bit more foot flare on the one on the left, obviously. You're not sagging into the lead side with the hip to make up for the lack of extension anymore. The pelvis is much more stable than it was. It doesn't drift forward at the top of the backswing. And the extension in the spine and the trail leg. So we've got an extension in the trail leg. We've got more extension in the pelvis. We can see here that whilst the trail leg is extending, the pelvis is still tilted forward. And we have substantially increased the amount of extension in the spine versus where we had it previously. So a far, far better position at P4. Added to that, because of the increased extension, what we're now starting to do, to make sure these are both at P4, is we're starting to propel the lead arm further and also keep it straighter, which is then going to help with the distance the sweet spot travels and the controlling the radius, which is what we're going to come on to in the work section of this video. So far so good in the backswing. During the downswing, just going to match these two up. Again, because of the lack of contact, too much emphasis on weight forward. So you can see on the right, the pelvis drives a little bit too much, a little bit too soon. That in itself will not guarantee that you make solid contact. So when you're talking about controlling the divot, weight forward is part of it. It's the main contributing factor, but we have other things that we need to consider. So at the moment, there's too much emphasis on weight forward and not enough emphasis on controlling the radius of the swing. So coming on, work in progress, and we'll shed some more light on what we need to do now. So I'm just going to switch over and get a model swing. Okay, so we've got Aaron Baddeley on the left, and I've stopped him when the lead arm is vertical to the ground. Just going to get rid of all these. centre of the arch, the lead shoulder, lead arm, as close as we're going to get it to vertical to the ground. And we can see in Aaron's case that the shaft is still hanging behind the lead arm. So at this point, the shaft and the lead arm have not lined up with one another. So what that means is that during the downswing from P4, the lead arm is always swinging forward. The right arm is always straightening. And then from P6, the wrist starts to uncock and the rolling aspect kicks in. Now in your case, the rate at which the wrists uncock is slightly too high. Now when the wrists uncock at slightly too high a rate and the shaft from P6 starts to catch up with the lead arm too fast, the arc widens, and as it widens, it goes lower. So if this lead arm and the shaft line up before P7, we're going to hit the ground behind the ball. So it's not necessarily about having the weight forward. Aaron's weight's forward. It's moving forward at a steady rate, but the radius is being managed. Now, if we take your swing here now, and I appreciate the shaft's a little bit blurred, but if we take a line down the lead arm when it's vertical to the ground, we can see and we can sort of extrapolate from where the hands are and what the ball's doing, that your shaft is passing the hands at that point. So the rate at which your wrists uncock and the rate at which your lead arm and shaft, or the point at which your lead arm and shaft line up, is a little bit too early. And that's why the overtaking rate is a little bit too high. And that's why the arc is widening. As you come through the ball, you just see a little sag in the knees there. I'd like to see you I'd like to see you narrow your stance just a little bit. And in subsequent sessions, we'll work a little bit more on that. That in and itself is not going to cause you to hit the ground behind the ball. It's the rate at which the lead arm and the shaft line up. It's the rate at which the wrist angles come out from P6 to P7. So it doesn't matter how far you have your weight forward, which, I have no problem with the weight being forward, obviously, but the weight forward alone will not create good impact. It's having the weight forward and managing the radius of the goal swing. So the rate at which Aaron's wrists are coming out is more controlled. So what I'd like you to work on, and I'm going to draw this to the side of you with Aaron. Love the P4. We're going to go to P4 and stop, and then we're going to go down to a certain P6, and we're going to rehearse this twice before every shot. And the P6 I want you to create is a situation where the lead arm is vertical as the shaft gets level with the ground. So what this requires is you to considerably speed up the lead arm whilst maintaining the angles in the wrist. Now from such a position at P6, you couldn't release that radius quick enough to ever hit the ground behind the ball. Now you don't have to look like that at P6, but what we're seeing is evidence that your lead arm and shaft are lining up too soon, which is widening the radius of the goal swing. So before each shot, we're going to have the narrowest radius possible. So that's lead arm vertical, shaft parallel with the ground. Now, when you do that, you're going to get some different feels. As you do that, I'd like to use your lower body. So it's not just doing it with the arms, still use the lower body. But the other thing that you're going to find with this is your arms are not going to get left behind. So rather than having a situation where we look like the lower body is driving forward too fast, we're going to try and speed up this lead arm courtesy this drill. So we could get it here at 6. Then the drill, we're going to get it here. So we're speeding up the lead arm, which is also redirecting the right hand or the right arm straightening. So that's got like a thrusting action, but you're also maintaining the wrist angles. So that means that coming through impact, you're going to have the least overtaking. So if you consider where you would normally be when the lead arm's vertical, lead arm vertical, normally the shaft's down here. Whereas in this instance, when the lead arm's vertical during the pre-shot drill, the shaft's going to be here. So this is a sort of training process that you need to just apply and introduce gradually into your golf swing. You will see other things change slightly. I'd like you to send me a video across of you doing the drill before you start working on the drill. So in the next sort of day or so, if you can just get me a quick video across of you in the net demonstrating the drill that I've asked you to do, I can just check it, make sure that's right, and then we're good to go. We can get stuck in with that work. Okay, so tightening up of the radius as the weight moves forward, releasing the angles in the wrists at a more appropriate rate is the work that we need to do. We want to reduce the change in wrist angle from 6 to 7, which in turn will reduce the overtaking rate, but also keep the radius tight enough for you to get the divot after the ball on a more consistent basis. Good luck with it. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop me a line.